I was standing in the foyer of a French chateau, my suitcase still in my hand, staring at something that made no sense. My sister Julia was on her hands and knees on the marble floor, scrubbing with a brush. The floor was already clean. Spotless, actually. I could see my reflection in it. But she kept scrubbing anyway, her movements mechanical and desperate. She was wearing a plain gray dress that looked more like a uniform than regular clothes. Her hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful. She'd lost weight. A lot of weight. Her hands gripping the brush were red and raw, the skin cracked around her knuckles. I opened my mouth to say her name, but nothing came out. This wasn't right. This wasn't what I'd expected at all. For 6 years, Julia had been living in France with her rich husband and his fancy family. Her emails had described a beautiful life. Busy, she'd said, but happy. So happy. This wasn't happy. Julia, I finally managed to say. Her head snapped up so fast I heard her neck crack. The look on her face made my stomach drop. She wasn't surprised to see me. She wasn't happy or excited that her sister had flown across the ocean to visit after all these years. She was terrified. Her eyes went wide, her mouth opened like she wanted to scream, but couldn't make a sound. Her whole body started trembling. Then her eyes darted up to the grand staircase behind me. I turned and saw a woman standing there. Older, maybe in her 60s, dressed in expensive clothes with her silver hair pulled back in a tight bun. Her face was hard and cold as she stared down at Julia on the floor. She said something in French. Sharp. Demanding. I didn't understand the words, but I understood the tone. It was the way someone speaks to a servant they're disappointed in. Julia looked back down at the floor immediately and started scrubbing again, even faster than before. Her hands were shaking so badly the brush kept slipping. Julia, what's going on? I asked, taking a step toward her. She didn't look up. Didn't acknowledge me at all. Just kept scrubbing that already clean floor like her life depended on it. Before I could say anything else, I heard footsteps behind me. Amanda. I turned to see a tall man in an expensive suit walking toward me with a huge smile on his face. Christophe. My brother-in-law. I'd only seen him in photos Julia had sent years ago. What a wonderful surprise, he said in perfect English, his accent making the words sound sophisticated and warm. Julia didn't tell us you were coming. His smile was friendly. His voice was cheerful. But his eyes weren't warm at all. They flicked down to Julia, still on her knees scrubbing, and something passed across his face. Annoyance, maybe. Or warning. Then he looked back at me and the smile got even bigger. Please, come in properly. You must be exhausted from your journey. Julia, stop that for now and help our guest. Julia stood up slowly, setting the brush down in a bucket of soapy water. She kept her eyes on the floor as she walked toward me. Hi, she whispered, her voice so quiet I barely heard it. This close, I could see how much she'd changed. Her face was thinner, more drawn. There were dark circles under her eyes. She looked older than 28. She looked tired in a way that went deeper than just needing sleep. She looked broken. Jules, I said, using the nickname I'd called her since she was little. What's happening here? Why were you? Let's get you settled first, Christophe interrupted smoothly, taking my suitcase from my hand. You must want to rest, maybe have some tea. Julia can show you to the guest room. We'll have plenty of time to catch up. The woman on the staircase said something else in French. Christophe responded, then turned back to me. My mother Marguerite welcomes you to our home. She apologizes that her English is not good. Marguerite didn't look apologetic. She looked like she was sizing me up and finding me lacking. Julia stood next to me, her body rigid, her eyes still on the floor. She wouldn't look at me, wouldn't meet my eyes. And that's when I knew with absolute certainty that something was very, very wrong. My sister hadn't been living a dream life in France. She'd been living a nightmare. And I just walked right into the middle of it. Let me take you back to the beginning. To 1 week ago, when I got the phone call that made me book a flight to France without telling anyone I was coming. The phone call that saved my sister's life. 1 week earlier, I was sitting at my kitchen table in Chicago grading essays about the American Revolution. My students had gotten creative with their interpretations, and I was halfway through one claiming Benjamin Franklin invented electricity when my phone rang. Unknown international number. I almost didn't answer. Probably spam. But something made me pick up. Hello. Amanda. Julia's voice came through, distant and tinny. Happy birthday. My birthday. I'd actually forgotten. 32 felt like just another day when you lived alone and spent your evenings grading papers. Jules. Oh my God, it's so good to hear your voice. How are you? There was a pause. Too long of a pause. I'm good. Everything's good here. France is beautiful this time of year. Her words were right, but something about her tone was wrong. Flat. Like she was reading from a script someone had written for her. How's Christophe? How's his family? They're wonderful. So kind to me. The chateau is amazing. You'd love it. I'd heard about the chateau in her emails. The historic family estate, the gardens, the rooms full of antiques. It sounded like something from a movie. I miss you, I said. It's been 6 years, Jules. When can I come visit? Another pause. Oh, you know how busy things are. Maybe next year. The family has so many obligations. What about a video call? I want to see your face. The internet here is terrible. Very old house, you know. Bad connection. She'd said that before. Multiple times. Every time I suggested a video call, there was an excuse. Are you happy? I asked directly. Really happy? The pause this time was even longer. Of course. I have everything I ever wanted. Beautiful home, financial security, a good family. But she didn't say she loved Christophe. Didn't say she was fulfilled or excited about her life. Just listed things like items on an inventory. Jules. In the background, I heard a voice. A woman's voice, sharp and commanding, speaking rapid French. Julia's breath hitched. I heard it clearly. I have to go, she said quickly. The family needs me for something. Love you, Amanda. Bye. The line went dead. I sat staring at my phone, that familiar teacher instinct kicking in. The one that helped me spot when students were hiding things. When something was wrong at home, but they were too scared to say it. I tried calling back. No answer. I texted. No response. For the rest of the evening, I couldn't focus on anything else. I kept replaying that phone call in my head. The flat tone. The long pauses. The way she'd rushed off the phone when that voice appeared in the background. I pulled up old emails from Julia, reading them with fresh eyes. Things are busy here, but I'm adjusting. The family has high standards, but I'm learning. I don't have much time to paint anymore, but that's just part of growing up. Julia had loved painting. It was her whole world. She'd gone to art school on scholarship, spent every free moment with a brush in her hand. The idea that she'd just stopped painting didn't make sense. None of it made sense. I thought back to 6 years ago when Julia had called me, breathless with excitement, saying she'd met someone. Christophe. A French businessman in New York for work. He was sophisticated, charming, from old money. He'd swept her off her feet with expensive dinners and romantic gestures. They'd gotten married 4 months later in France. A small ceremony, she'd said. Just immediate family. I couldn't afford the plane ticket. I was paying off student loans and supporting myself on a teacher's salary. I'd felt terrible about missing it, but Julia had understood. Or at least she'd said she understood. After the wedding, her communication had changed. Less frequent. More formal. Always positive but vague. I'd told myself she was just busy adjusting to married life. To a new country. A new language. A new family. But what if I'd been wrong? What if something else was happening? I opened my laptop and looked up flights to France. Expensive. Really expensive, especially last minute. I checked my savings account. I'd been putting money aside for maybe buying a car eventually. Nothing glamorous. Just a reliable used Honda. I could use that money for a plane ticket instead. My finger hovered over the purchase button. Was I overreacting? Making something out of nothing because of one weird phone call? But then I remembered Julia's voice. That flatness. That fear when the background voice appeared. And I remembered something our mom used to say before she died. Sisters look out for each other. Always. No matter what. Mom and Dad had died in a car accident when I was 20 and Julia was 16. I'd become her guardian, raised her through high school, helped her get to college. We'd been through everything together. I wasn't about to abandon her now. I clicked purchase. The flight left in 3 days. I wouldn't tell Julia I was coming. If something was wrong, I didn't want anyone preparing for my arrival. I wanted to see the truth with my own eyes. I booked the ticket and started packing. 3 days later, I was on a plane crossing the Atlantic, my stomach tight with worry, having no idea that what I was about to discover would be so much worse than I'd imagined. The plane landed in Paris early Tuesday morning. I was exhausted, cramped from the overnight flight, but too anxious to care. I grabbed my carry-on and small suitcase and headed straight for the train station. The train to Beaumont took 2 hours through French countryside that would have been beautiful if I wasn't so worried. Rolling hills, old farmhouses, vineyards. Everything looked like a postcard. I kept checking my phone, half expecting Julia to call or text, but there was nothing. Beaumont was exactly the kind of town tourists loved. Cobblestone streets. A medieval church with a tall spire. Cafes with tables outside where people sat drinking coffee and speaking French. Flower boxes on every window. It looked perfect. Charming. Safe. I showed the taxi driver the address Julia had given me years ago. His eyebrows went up slightly. Chateau Moreau, he said, nodding. Very old family. Important. We drove out of the town center, past smaller houses, until we reached an area where properties got bigger and farther apart. Finally, he turned down a private road. The chateau appeared through the trees. It was massive. 3 stories of pale stone, with tall windows and a slate roof. Manicured gardens stretched out on both sides. There was an iron gate at the entrance, with the family crest worked into the metal. This was old money. Serious money. The kind of wealth that came with expectations and rules I probably couldn't even imagine. I paid the driver and stood at the gate, my suitcase beside me. There was a call button with a camera above it. I pressed it. A moment later, a male voice came through the speaker, speaking French. "I'm Amanda Fletcher," I said clearly. "Julia's sister. I'm here to visit." There was a long pause. I heard muffled voices on the other end, like people conferring. Then a different voice, younger, speaking English with an accent. "Julia's sister? Does she know you're coming?" I wanted to surprise her. Another pause. This one even longer. Finally, the gate began to swing open with a low metallic groan. I pulled my suitcase up the long driveway. It curved through perfectly trimmed lawns and past fountains that probably cost more than my yearly salary. The house got bigger the closer I got. My heart was pounding. Something about this place felt wrong. Too quiet. Too perfect. Like a museum instead of a home where people actually lived. The front door opened before I reached it. A man stepped out. Young, maybe 30, dressed casually but in clothes that were clearly expensive. Dark hair, sharp features, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You must be Amanda," he said in good English. "I'm Philippe, Christophe's brother. This is quite a surprise. Is Julia here?" "Of course. She's just..." He hesitated, choosing his words carefully, busy with household tasks. "Come in. I'll find her for you." He stepped aside and I walked into the foyer. It took my breath away for a second. Marble floors. A crystal chandelier. A grand staircase that curved up to the second floor. Paintings on the walls that looked centuries old. Furniture that belonged in a palace. This was where Julia lived? Philippe excused himself, disappearing through a doorway while speaking rapid French to someone I couldn't see. I heard at least 3 different voices responding. All speaking fast, all sounding tense. I stood there with my suitcase, looking around, feeling completely out of place in my jeans and travel-worn jacket. That's when I heard it. The sound of scrubbing. Rhythmic. Desperate. I followed the sound down a hallway off the main foyer. The marble floors gleamed under the morning light coming through tall windows. And there she was. Julia. On her hands and knees. Scrubbing a floor that was already perfect. She looked so small down there. So thin. Her shoulder blades stuck out through the thin fabric of her dress. This wasn't my sister. Not the Julia I remembered. That Julia had been vibrant, confident, always laughing. This woman looked like someone had taken all the life out of her and left just a shell. "Julia," I said. She looked up, and the expression on her face made everything clear. She wasn't happy to see me. She was terrified. Her eyes went wide with panic. Her whole body started shaking. She looked up at the staircase behind me, and I turned to see an older woman standing there. Cold eyes, expensive clothes, a face that showed no warmth at all. The woman said something in French. Sharp, commanding. Julia immediately looked back down and started scrubbing faster, her hands trembling so badly I didn't know how she held onto the brush. "Julia, what are you doing?" I asked, my voice coming out louder than I meant it to. "Why are you scrubbing the floor?" She didn't answer. Didn't even look at me. Just kept scrubbing like I hadn't spoken. Footsteps behind me made me turn. Christoph stood there in a business suit, briefcase in hand, looking like he'd just come from somewhere important. His face transformed when he saw me. Surprise turned to confusion, turned to a warm, welcoming smile so fast it was almost disturbing. "Amanda, what a wonderful surprise. Julia didn't tell us you were coming." But his eyes weren't smiling. They were calculating, assessing. And when they flicked down to Julia on the floor, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Satisfaction. Like this was exactly where he wanted her. Christoph's charm was overwhelming and immediate. He insisted I stay with them, wouldn't hear of me going to a hotel. He took my suitcase from my hand and called to Julia in French. She stood up slowly, like her body hurt, and set the brush carefully in a bucket of soapy water. Up close, the changes were even more shocking. Julia had always been slim, but now she was gaunt. Her cheekbones stuck out. Her wrists looked like I could snap them. The dark circles under her eyes were deep purple. "Hi," she whispered, still not meeting my eyes. I wanted to grab her and demand to know what was happening. But Christoph was right there, smiling his perfect smile, and the cold woman on the stairs was watching everything. "Julia can show you around while I make some calls," Christoph said. "Then we'll have lunch together. You must be starving after your journey." He spoke to his mother in French. She responded with what sounded like a question, her tone suspicious. He answered smoothly, gesturing to me like he was explaining who I was. The woman's eyes narrowed as she looked me over. She said something that sounded formal and completely insincere. "My mother Marguerite welcomes you," Christoph translated. "She apologizes for her limited English." Marguerite didn't look apologetic. She looked annoyed that I existed. She descended the stairs slowly, her back straight, moving like royalty. When she reached the bottom, she said something directly to Julia in a sharp tone. Julia's whole body tensed. "Oui, madam," she said quietly. "Madam." She called her mother-in-law madam. Not mother or even Marguerite. Like she was a servant addressing her employer. Marguerite walked past us without acknowledging me again, disappearing through a doorway. "Julia, show Amanda upstairs," Christoph said. Then he switched to French, speaking quickly to her. I watched Julia's face as he talked. She nodded several times, her expression submissive and fearful. When he finished, he smiled at me again. "I'll see you both at lunch. 1 o'clock. He left through the front door, and suddenly Julia and I were alone in the foyer. "Jules," I started. "Not here," she whispered, glancing around like the walls might be listening. "Come upstairs." I followed her up the grand staircase. The second-floor hallway was lined with more paintings and antique furniture. She led me to a room at the end and opened the door. The guest room was beautiful. A four-poster bed, elegant furniture, windows overlooking the gardens. But it felt cold, impersonal. Julia closed the door behind us and stood there, her arms wrapped around herself. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "I came to see you. That phone call last week, Jules, you sounded wrong." I was worried. "You shouldn't have come. Why were you scrubbing the floor? Don't they have housekeepers?" She looked at the floor. "I help with the household. It's expected." "Expected? You're family, not staff. You don't understand. Things are different here. The family has traditions, ways of doing things. Like treating you like a maid? It's not like that." But her voice was so quiet, so defeated, that even she didn't believe what she was saying. Then what is it like? Explain it to me. Before she could answer, there was a knock on the door. Julia's face went pale. She opened it to find Philippe standing there. He spoke to her in French. She nodded and responded. He glanced at me. Lunch is ready early. Mother wants to eat now. Julia immediately started toward the door. We were just talking, I said. You can talk at lunch, Philippe replied, his smile polite but firm. Downstairs, the dining room was formal and intimidating. A long table that could seat 20 people. Only 5 places were set, clustered at one end. Marguerite sat at the head of the table. Christophe had returned and sat to her right. Philippe took the seat to her left. Julia sat next to Christophe. I sat next to Julia. A young woman I hadn't seen before brought out food. She glanced at Julia with something that looked like pity, then quickly looked away. Lunch was uncomfortable from the first moment. The conversation was mostly in French. Marguerite would say something. Christophe or Philippe would respond. Julia stayed silent, eating almost nothing. I tried to engage Julia directly. So, what do you do all day? Have you been painting? Before Julia could answer, Christophe spoke. Julia keeps very busy with household duties. She doesn't have time for hobbies anymore. Painting isn't a hobby for her. It's her passion. Was her passion, Marguerite said in heavily accented English. Now she has responsibilities. The way she said responsibilities felt loaded with meaning I didn't fully understand. Jules, is that true? I asked. You stopped painting completely? Julia's hands were shaking. She set down her fork carefully. I don't have the time. You could make time. Marguerite said something sharp in French. Julia immediately looked down at her plate. My mother says this is not appropriate conversation for the table, Christophe translated, though something about his tone made me think that wasn't exactly what she'd said. The rest of the meal passed in tense silence. Julia pushed food around her plate, but barely ate anything. I noticed Marguerite watching her, counting every bite she didn't take. When Julia reached for her water glass, her hand shook. The glass tipped, spilling water across the white tablecloth. The reaction was instant. Marguerite's face went hard. She said something in French that I didn't need translated to understand. It was cruel. Julia stood up quickly, grabbing a napkin, apologizing in French over and over. Pardon, je suis désolée. Her whole body was trembling. There were tears in her eyes. Over spilled water. It's just water, I said. It's not a big deal. But everyone else acted like Julia had committed some terrible offense. Christophe sighed like he was disappointed. Philippe looked annoyed. Marguerite kept speaking, her voice getting sharper. Julia cleaned up the water with shaking hands, still apologizing, and I realized something that made my stomach turn. She wasn't just afraid of displeasing them. She was terrified. That night, I couldn't sleep. The guest room was too quiet. Too cold despite the expensive linens and thick curtains. I kept thinking about Julia's face when she spilled that water. The absolute terror over something so small. Around midnight, I heard sounds from downstairs. Footsteps. The clink of dishes. I got out of bed and crept to my door, opening it quietly. The hallway was dark except for a faint light coming from downstairs. I made my way down the grand staircase, following the sounds to the kitchen. Julia was there, washing dishes by hand even though I'd seen a dishwasher earlier. She was still in that plain dress, her hair still pulled back tight. Jules, what are you doing? It's midnight. She jumped so badly she dropped a plate. It hit the floor and shattered into pieces. No, she whispered frantically, dropping to her knees immediately to pick up the shards. She's going to be so angry. I'm so clumsy. I'm so stupid. Stop, I said, kneeling beside her. Jules, it's just a plate. Stop. But she wasn't listening. She was picking up pieces with shaking hands, cutting her finger on one of the sharp edges. Blood dripped onto the white tile floor. You're bleeding. Stop, let me help. I have to clean it up before anyone sees. If Marguerite finds out I broke another one. Another one? Tears were streaming down her face now. I break things because I'm careless and she keeps track and I have to replace them from my allowance, but I don't have enough and… What allowance? Jules, you're married to a wealthy man. Why do you have an allowance? She looked up at me, and in her eyes I saw something that broke my heart. Shame. Deep, crushing shame. You need to leave tomorrow, she whispered. Please, Amanda. You being here makes everything harder. I'm not leaving without you. You don't understand. You can't just. A light flicked on. We both froze. Christoph stood in the doorway in a silk robe, his hair perfect even though he'd supposedly been sleeping. His eyes went to the broken plate, then to Julia on the floor, then to me. What happened? His voice was cold. I broke a plate, Julia said immediately, her voice small. I'm cleaning it up. I'm sorry. I'll pay for it. You woke the entire house with your clumsiness. He walked closer, looking down at her like she was something disgusting on the bottom of his shoe. Get it cleaned up and go to bed. We'll discuss your carelessness in the morning. Then he looked at me, and the coldness in his voice warmed to something more polite. Amanda, you should rest. Tomorrow we'll show you around the town. There are some beautiful sights. He left without another word. Julia finished picking up the pieces in silence, dumping them in the trash. She wrapped her bleeding finger in a paper towel and put away the remaining dishes with mechanical efficiency. Where's your room? I asked. I'll walk you back. I sleep in the servants' quarters, she said quietly. 3rd floor. The servants' quarters? Jules, you're his wife. Christoph says I snore. That I disturb his sleep. It's better this way. Nothing about this was better. I wanted to grab her and shake her and tell her to wake up, to see what was happening to her. But she looked so fragile I was afraid she might break. She disappeared up a back staircase I hadn't even known existed, and I went back to my room, my mind racing. The next morning, I woke up early and went outside. I needed air. Needed to think. The gardens were extensive, and I wandered through them until I found an older man trimming hedges near the back of the property. Bonjour, I tried. He looked up and smiled. Bonjour. You're American, yes? Yes. I'm Julia's sister. Amanda. His expression changed immediately. Became sad. Madam Julia. She is kind lady. Very sad. His English was broken but understandable. Do you work here? I asked. 40 years I work for this family. I am Henri. I take care of gardens. Can I ask you something? About my sister. Is she okay here? Henri looked around to make sure we were alone. Then he spoke quietly. Your sister, she work all the time. Clean, cook, serve family. Madame Marguerite, she treat her very bad. Like servant. Worse than servant. I have worked here long time. I see many things. This is not right. How long has this been going on? Since she arrived. Maybe it get worse over time. First year, she still smiles sometimes. Still try to paint and garden. Then Madame Marguerite find the paintings. She burn them. Say they are not proper for family. Your sister, she cry for many days after that. She not paint anymore. I felt rage building in my chest, hot and fierce. She burned Julia's paintings? Henri nodded sadly. All of them. Beautiful paintings. Gone. Does Christoph know? Does he let his mother treat Julia like this? Monsieur Christoph, he like his mother. He want wife who is quiet, who obey, who make family look good. Your sister, she try very hard to be what they want. But nothing is ever enough. We talked for another 20 minutes. Henri told me things that made me sick. How Julia worked from dawn until late at night. How she ate last and least at every meal. How Marguerite criticized everything she did. How Christoph ignored her except to correct her. How my sister had become a prisoner in a beautiful cage. When I came back inside, Christoph and Philippe were both gone for the day. Some business in Paris, a maid told me in broken English. I found Marguerite in the sitting room, reading a book. I pulled out my phone, opened a translation app, and typed out a message. Held it up for her to read. Why do you treat my sister like a servant? She read it, then looked at me with cold amusement. She took my phone and typed her own response. She married into this family. She must earn her place. She has no money, no title, no value except what she provides through service. If she doesn't like it, she can leave. But Christoph will divorce her, and she will have nothing. She signed papers. My blood went cold. What papers? Marguerite smiled. Actually smiled. She stood and walked out of the room. I needed to find those papers. That afternoon, while Marguerite was napping and Julia was doing laundry in the basement, I snuck into Christophe's study. It took me 15 minutes to find them, hidden in a locked drawer I managed to pick open with a hairpin. A prenuptial agreement that gave Julia absolutely nothing if the marriage ended. Not a cent. And another document, in French, that Julia had signed. I used my phone to translate it. It was presented as a traditional French marriage document, giving Christophe full authority over household decisions, finances, and even Julia's personal choices. It wasn't traditional. It wasn't even legal in France. It was a manipulation designed to make Julia feel trapped. I photographed every page. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. I shoved the documents back, closed the drawer, and barely made it to the doorway before Christophe appeared. His eyes narrowed when he saw me coming out of his study. "Looking for something?" he asked. "Bathroom," I lied. Got turned around. "This house is like a maze." He didn't believe me. I could see it in his face. But he smiled anyway. "The bathroom is down the hall. Let me show you." As he walked me away from his study, I knew I was running out of time. I needed to get Julia out of here. And I needed to do it soon. That evening, Christophe came home from Paris earlier than expected. I was in the sitting room, pretending to read a book about French history I'd found on a shelf when he walked in. He dropped the charming facade. His expression was cold and calculating as he sat down across from me. "We need to talk," he said. "About Julia." "Yes, we do. I don't know what she's told you, but my wife is very happy here." "Your wife is terrified. You treat her like a slave." He laughed. Actually laughed. "That's a very American perspective. Here in France, in families like ours, everyone has their role. Julia understands hers. Her role is to scrub floors and be afraid of your mother. Her role is to contribute to this household, to earn her place in a family that is far above her station." The mask was completely off now. This was the real Christophe. She didn't marry a station. She married a person. You. She married into opportunity, into wealth and security she never could have achieved on her own. A girl from nowhere with no family money, no connections, just some useless art degree. He leaned forward. "Do you know how many women would kill for what Julia has? A beautiful home, financial security, a respected family name. And what does she have to do to keep all that? Whatever is required. That's how marriage works in families like mine. That's not marriage. That's servitude." His eyes went hard. "Your sister signed agreements. Legal documents." She knew what she was getting into. "She signed documents you lied to her about. Documents that aren't even legal." His expression changed slightly. Surprise, then anger. "You went through my private papers." "I did. And I photographed all of them. The prenup that leaves her with nothing. That fake traditional marriage document you used to control her." Christophe stood up slowly. "You had no right. I have every right. She's my sister." Before he could respond, Marguerite entered the room. She must have heard our raised voices. She spoke rapidly in French to Christophe, her tone sharp and demanding. He responded, gesturing to me, clearly explaining what I'd done. Marguerite's face went cold with fury. She looked at me like I was an insect to be crushed. The argument that followed was explosive. Even though half of it was in French, I understood the intent. Marguerite wanted me gone immediately. Christophe was trying to stay calm, but his anger was showing through. "You need to leave," he finally said to me in English. "Tomorrow morning. This is our home, and you've violated our privacy. I'm not leaving without Julia. Julia is my wife. She stays here. Not if she doesn't want to. She has nowhere to go. No money. No resources. Those agreements you're so concerned about? They're binding. If she leaves me, she gets nothing. Not a single euro. And I'll make sure she's deported with nothing but the clothes on her back. You can't do that. She's an American citizen who married into a French family and has lived here for 6 years, who signed legal documents in France. The law here is very different from America, Amanda. And my family has lawyers who have been practicing longer than you've been alive. I felt my confidence waver. I didn't know French law. Didn't know what rights Julia actually had here. Where is she? I asked. In the kitchen, preparing dinner. Where she belongs. I pushed past him and Marguerite, heading for the kitchen. Julia was there, chopping vegetables with those raw, damaged hands. She looked up when I entered, her eyes wide. Pack a bag, I said. We're leaving. Tonight. I can't. Yes, you can. I have photos of the documents. Evidence. We'll go to the American embassy. They'll help you. The agreements are fraudulent. Jules, he's been manipulating you. Abusing you. This isn't legal. This isn't right. Tears started running down her face. You don't understand. I have nothing. No money of my own. Nowhere to go. If I leave, I'll have nothing. You'll have me. You'll have your freedom. That's worth more than this prison. But she was shaking her head, backing away from me. I can't. I'm too afraid. What if you're wrong? What if the documents are legal and I end up with nothing? What if you stay here and they destroy what's left of you? I grabbed her shoulders gently. Jules, look at me. This isn't living. This is surviving. Barely. Footsteps behind me. Christophe entered the kitchen, his phone in his hand. Amanda, I've called the police. You're trespassing. Harassing my family. I want you removed from my property. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. You've gone through my private documents. You've upset my mother. You're trying to turn my wife against me. That constitutes harassment under French law. Within 20 minutes, 2 police officers arrived. They spoke limited English, but Christophe's French was smooth and convincing. I tried to explain. Tried to show them the photos on my phone. Tried to tell them Julia was being abused. But Christophe was calm, rational, playing the part of the reasonable husband dealing with a hysterical American sister-in-law. The officers looked uncomfortable. One of them, older with gray hair and kind eyes, seemed to understand some of what I was saying. He looked at Julia. Madam? You're okay? He asked in halting English. Julia stood frozen in the kitchen doorway. Christophe was watching her. Marguerite was watching her. Philippe had appeared and was watching her. Everyone was watching her. This was her moment. Her chance to speak up. To ask for help. I held my breath. I'm fine, Julia whispered. Just a family misunderstanding. The officer nodded slowly. He didn't look convinced, but without Julia confirming anything, there was nothing he could do. They asked me to leave. Said I could come back tomorrow to discuss things calmly, but tonight I needed to go. I'm not leaving her here, I said. The older officer, the one with the kind eyes, stepped closer. His name tag read Bernard. You have proof, he asked quietly. Of abuse. I pulled out my phone and showed him everything. The documents. Photos I'd secretly taken of Julia's damaged hands. A short video I'd recorded that morning of Marguerite berating Julia in the kitchen. Detective Bernard's expression changed as he looked through everything. He spoke to his partner in rapid French, then turned to Christophe. The conversation that followed was tense. Christophe's smooth charm was cracking. Bernard kept asking questions, kept pressing. Finally, Bernard turned to Julia. Madam, I need speak with you. Alone. Is okay? Julia looked at Christophe. He gave a tiny shake of his head. But Bernard had seen it. Madam, this is police business. You come with me. Now. And something in his voice, some note of authority and kindness combined, made Julia nod. She followed Bernard out of the kitchen, leaving me standing there with Christophe, Marguerite, and the other officer. Christophe's mask finally cracked completely. The rage underneath showed through. You have no idea what you've done, he said quietly. I saved my sister, I replied. You've ruined everything. Good. Detective Bernard took Julia into the sitting room and closed the door. I could hear their voices through the wall but couldn't make out the words. Christophe paced the hallway like a caged animal. Marguerite sat rigid in a chair, her face frozen in fury. Philippe had disappeared. The other officer stood near the door, watching all of us carefully. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Finally, the door opened. Julia came out first, her face blotchy from crying. Bernard followed, his expression serious. He spoke to his partner in French, then turned to Christophe. What he said made Christophe's face go white. Bernard switched to English for my benefit. Madame Julia has confirmed abuse. Psychological, financial, forced labor. She wishes to leave this house tonight. That's absurd, Christophe said, his voice tight. She's my wife. She's upset because her sister has been filling her head with. She has showed me her hands. Her living quarters. She has told me about destroyed property, about documents signed under false pretenses. This is serious matter. Those are private family affairs. Forced labor is not private affair. Is crime. Marguerite stood up, shouting in French. Bernard responded calmly but firmly. Then he looked at Julia. You are certain? You wish to leave? Julia's whole body was shaking, but she nodded. Yes. Then we arrange safe place for tonight. Tomorrow, we investigate further. She's not going anywhere, Christophe said. She has no money, no passport. Her passport is in your study, I interrupted. Third drawer on the right, under some files. Christophe's eyes went cold. You had no right. Get the passport, Bernard said. Now. For a moment, I thought Christophe would refuse. But Bernard's hand moved to his belt, near his weapon, and Christophe seemed to realize he'd lost control of the situation. He left and returned with Julia's passport, practically throwing it at her. Bernard made phone calls. Arranged for Julia to stay at a safe house run by an organization that helped abuse victims. Called the American Embassy to notify them of the situation. While we waited for transport, I helped Julia pack a small bag from her room on the third floor. The servants' quarters were tiny, cold, nothing like the grand bedrooms on the second floor. I can't believe I'm doing this, she whispered as she grabbed clothes from a small dresser. What if I'm making a mistake? You're not. Jules, you're saving yourself. But what if he's right? What if I end up with nothing? Then we'll figure it out. Together. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. Why didn't you give up on me? Because you're my sister. That's what we do. A car arrived to take Julia to the safe house. Bernard said I should come too, that it would be better if we stayed together tonight. As we walked out of the chateau, Christophe stood in the doorway watching. You'll regret this, he called out. Both of you. I have lawyers, Julia. Good lawyers. You signed agreements. You'll get nothing. Julia flinched, but she kept walking. At the safe house, a kind woman named Marie showed us to a small room with 2 beds. It was simple, clean, safe. Julia sat on one of the beds and started crying. Real crying, the kind that came from somewhere deep and broken. I held her while she sobbed. I'm so ashamed, she said. I let this happen to me. I stayed for 6 years. You were manipulated. Abused. That's not your fault. I should have been stronger. You survived. That took strength. Over the next few days, everything unfolded quickly. The American Embassy got involved. Bernard's investigation expanded when they discovered this wasn't Christophe's first time doing this. His first wife, a woman from Poland, had returned home 5 years ago according to family records. But when authorities tried to verify her whereabouts, they couldn't find her. The investigation revealed financial crimes too. Tax evasion. Fraud. The family's wealth was built partly on illegal activities they'd hidden for years. The prenuptial agreement was declared invalid due to coercion and false pretenses. The marriage document was complete fraud. Julia was granted an annulment within 3 months. But the legal process was just the beginning. The real healing took much longer. 6 months later, Julia and I were back in Chicago. She was living with me while she rebuilt her life. She'd started therapy. Started eating properly again. Her hands were healing, the raw skin slowly becoming soft again. One evening, I came home from work and found her in my spare bedroom with an easel set up. She was painting for the first time in 6 years. The canvas showed a woman in a dark room with a single door open, light streaming through. It's not very good yet, she said when she noticed me watching. I'm out of practice. It's beautiful. She smiled. A real smile. The first genuine one I'd seen since I'd arrived in France. I'm painting again, she said, wonder in her voice. I'd forgotten how much I loved it. I'm glad you remembered. A year after that, Julia had her first small gallery show in Chicago. The pieces were powerful, dark but hopeful. About captivity and freedom. About losing yourself and finding your way back. Several pieces sold. A local art magazine did a feature on her. She was building a life. A real one. On her own terms. 2 years after France, we were having dinner at my apartment when Julia's phone buzzed. An email from Detective Bernard. Christophe had been convicted of fraud and exploitation. Sentenced to 4 years in prison. His family's assets were being seized to pay restitution to victims. There had been 3 other women before Julia. All foreign. All isolated and controlled the same way. Julia set down her phone and looked at me. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For not giving up on me. For coming to France even when I tried to push you away. You're my sister. I'll always come for you." She reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was soft now, the scars faded but not gone. "I thought I'd lost myself completely," she said. "Thought the person I used to be was just gone forever. But you helped me remember. You saved yourself, Jules. I just showed up. You did more than show up. You saw me. Really saw me. Even when I was too scared to ask for help." 3 years after France, Julia moved into her own apartment. Small but hers. Filled with her paintings and plants and light. She had friends. A job teaching art classes at a community center. A life that was simple but genuine. One Saturday, I helped her hang new curtains in her living room. When we finished, she stood back and looked around with satisfaction. "It's not a chateau," she said. "No, it's better. It's yours." She smiled. "Yeah, it is." That evening, as I was leaving, she hugged me tight. "I'm okay now," she whispered. "Really okay. You can stop worrying. I'm your big sister. I'll never stop worrying. I know. But I'm going to be fine. Better than fine." She was right. The woman who'd been on her knees scrubbing floors in France was gone. In her place was someone stronger. Someone who'd survived hell and come out the other side. My sister. Free.